Sarah Martinez stared at the coffee-stained resignation letter on her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her pen. After 15 years as a commercial airline pilot, she was ready to hang up her wings forever. The countless, red-eye flights demanding passengers and soul-crushing routine had drained every ounce of passion she once felt for flying. What her colleagues at Delta Airlines didn't know was that the quiet, reserved Captain Martinez sitting in the cockpit of their Boeing 737 was once the most feared pilot in the skies above Miramar. The fluorescent lights of the crew lounge hummed overhead as Sarah packed her flight bag for what she believed would be her final journey. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter Emma, now 22 and fresh out of college. "Mom, I'm so proud of you for following your dreams and becoming a pilot. You've always been my hero." Sarah's throat tightened as she read those words. If only Emma knew the truth about what her mother had really accomplished in the cockpit. Sarah's mind drifted back to 1995, when she was Lieutenant Sarah Chen, fresh out of the Naval Academy and burning with ambition to prove herself in a male-dominated world. She had graduated top of her class from flight school, but that was just the beginning. The real test came when she received orders that would change her life forever. Report to the Navy's elite fighter weapons school, better known as Top Gun. Walking into the Miramar briefing room for the first time, Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her. She was one of only 3 women in a class of 36 pilots, and the whispers followed her everywhere. "Think she'll last a week?" one pilot muttered. "Probably got in because of some diversity quota," another added. Sarah kept her head high and her mouth shut, but inside, her determination burned like jet fuel. The instructors at Top Gun were legendary figures in naval aviation, pilots who had seen combat and survived to tell the tale. Commander Jake Viper Mitchell stood at the front of the classroom, his steel-gray eyes scanning the assembled pilots. "Ladies and gentlemen, you think you're hot shots because you made it here. You're wrong. Only the best of the best earn the Top Gun trophy, and most of you will wash out before week 3. Sarah absorbed every word, every lesson, every critique with the intensity of a sponge soaking up water. While her classmates hit the bars after long days of training, she studied flight manuals and analyzed gun camera footage until her eyes burned. She practiced emergency procedures in the simulator until the technicians had to force her out. Her call sign, Ghost, came naturally. She seemed to appear out of nowhere during training exercises, striking with precision before vanishing into the clouds. The physical demands of Top Gun were unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Pulling 9 Gs in an F-14 Tomcat while trying to maintain tactical awareness pushed every pilot to their limits. Sarah's smaller frame actually worked to her advantage. She could handle the crushing force better than some of her larger male counterparts. But it wasn't just about surviving the ride. She had to think, react, and fight while her body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her first real test came during a one-on-one engagement with Lieutenant Commander Rick Iceman Torres, a pilot, with over 2,000 flight hours and a reputation for never losing. The exercise was simple. Gain a firing solution on your opponent while avoiding getting shot down yourself. Sarah climbed her F-14 to 30,000 feet, using the morning sun as cover. Iceman was good, but Sarah had studied his patterns from previous exercises. She knew he always turned left when pressured, always climbed when threatened from below. The engagement lasted 12 minutes of high-G maneuvering that left both pilots drenched in sweat. Sarah used every trick she had learned, every instinct she had developed. When Iceman made his predictable left turn, Sarah was waiting. "Fox 2, Iceman, you're dead," she called over the radio, indicating a successful missile lock. The silence that followed on the radio frequency was deafening. She had just beaten one of the Navy's top instructors. Word of Ghost's victory spread through Miramar like wildfire. Suddenly, the whispers changed from doubt to respect, though some pilots claimed it was just beginner's luck. Sarah didn't care what they said. She knew she belonged here, and she was going to prove it every single day. The instructors began watching her more closely, not with suspicion but with genuine interest. They saw something special in the young pilot from California. As the weeks progressed, Sarah's skills continued to sharpen. She mastered air-to-air combat, learned to think 3 moves ahead like a chess grandmaster, Her situational awareness became legendary among her classmates. During a complex multi-plane exercise, Sarah managed to track and engage 4 separate targets while avoiding 3 different missile locks. The controllers in the tower watched in amazement as Ghost danced through the sky untouchable and deadly. But success at Top Gun came with a price. The pressure was relentless and several pilots had already washed out. Sarah watched good pilots crack under the stress, their confidence shattered by the constant evaluation and competition. She began to understand that Top Gun wasn't just about flying skills. It was about mental toughness, about maintaining focus when everything around you was chaos. Her relationship with her fellow pilots was complicated. Some respected her abilities and welcomed her as an equal. Others resented her success and made snide comments about special treatment. Sarah learned to navigate these politics carefully, never backing down from a challenge but also never escalating unnecessary conflicts. She let her performance in the cockpit do the talking. The halfway point of the program marked the beginning of the real competition. The instructors announced that the remaining pilots would be ranked based on overall performance, with the top graduate earning the coveted Top Gun trophy. Sarah looked around the briefing room at her remaining classmates, 18 of the best naval aviators in the world. She knew that what happened next would define not just her career, but her entire identity as a pilot. The quiet girl from Piu, California was about to make history, though she had no idea that decades later she would keep that history locked away like a classified secret. The competition intensified as the remaining 18 pilots entered the final phase of Top Gun training. Sarah had consistently ranked in the top 3 during weekly evaluations, but she knew that maintaining that position would require everything she had learned and more. The exercises became increasingly complex, designed to push each pilot beyond their perceived limitations and reveal who truly possessed the killer instinct necessary for aerial combat. Lieutenant Commander Torres, still smarting from his defeat during the one-on-one engagement, had become Sarah's primary rival. He was an exceptional pilot with years of experience, and his wounded pride drove him to study Sarah's every move. During briefings, he would question her tactics and challenge her decisions, trying to expose any weakness in her knowledge or reasoning. Sarah responded by diving even deeper into her preparation, analyzing not just her own performance but also studying the strengths and weaknesses of every remaining pilot. The morning of the first major evaluation dawned clear and perfect for flying. The exercise called for a simulated strike mission against a heavily defended target, with half the pilots playing the role of attackers and the other half serving as defenders. Sarah found herself assigned to the strike package, tasked with penetrating enemy airspace and delivering ordnance on target, while avoiding being shot down by the defending fighters. As she strapped into her F-14 Tomcat, Sarah felt the familiar pre-flight butterflies that every pilot experiences before a challenging mission. Her radar intercept officer, Lieutenant Mike "Goose" Patterson, ran through the pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. Goose had been paired with Sarah since the beginning of the program, and their partnership had evolved into something approaching telepathy in the cockpit. The strike package consisted of 6 F-14s, loaded with simulated bombs, and tasked with hitting 3 separate targets within a narrow time window. Intelligence briefings indicated that the defending force would include some of the school's most experienced instructor pilots flying as adversaries. Sarah's aircraft was assigned to target the primary objective, a simulated command bunker defended by surface-to-air missiles and at least 4 enemy fighters. Taking off from Miramar, Sarah felt the familiar surge of power as her Tomcat's twin engines pushed the aircraft into the morning sky. The strike package formed up quickly and headed toward the training area, flying low to avoid early detection by the defending radar systems. Sarah reviewed her attack plan one final time, knowing that success would require split-second timing and flawless execution. The first phase of the mission went according to plan. The strike package penetrated the outer defensive perimeter without detection, using terrain masking and electronic countermeasures to remain invisible to the simulated enemy radar. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as they approached the initial point where the real action would begin. This was where the defending fighters would be waiting, and where her training would truly be tested. "Ghost, this is Viper," crackled the voice of Commander Mitchell over the radio. "Bandits approaching from the northeast. Estimate 4 aircraft inbound hot." Sarah acknowledged the warning and immediately began evasive maneuvering while maintaining course toward her target. The next few minutes would determine whether months of training had prepared her for this moment. The first defending fighter appeared as a dot on the horizon, growing rapidly larger as it approached at supersonic speed. Sarah recognized the aircraft type and pilot immediately. Lieutenant Commander Torres flying an F-16, configured for air-to-air combat. This was no coincidence. The instructors had deliberately matched their two top performers against each other to see who would emerge victorious. Sarah's training took over as she maneuvered her heavier F-14 to counter Torres's attack. The F-16 was more maneuverable, but Sarah had advantages in radar capability and missile range. She used these strengths to maintain distance while setting up for her own attack, all while continuing toward her assigned target. The engagement became a deadly dance at 500 miles per hour, with both pilots pushing their aircraft to the edge of their performance envelope. "Ghost, you have a second bandit approaching from your 6 o'clock, called Goose from the back seat, his eyes glued to the radar display. Sarah immediately rolled into a defensive maneuver, using the vertical plane to avoid giving the second attacker an easy shot. The G-forces pressed her deep into her ejection seat, but she maintained consciousness and situational awareness through techniques learned during countless hours of training. The engagement lasted only 90 seconds, but to Sarah it felt like hours. Torres was an aggressive pilot who pressed his attacks with determination, but Sarah had studied his patterns and anticipated his moves. When he committed to a high-angle attack, Sarah reversed course and gained the advantage, achieving a simulated missile lock that would have been fatal in real combat. "Fox 2, Iceman. You're dead," she called over the radio, using his call sign with satisfaction. With the immediate threat neutralized, Sarah turned her attention back to the primary mission. The target area was now visible in the distance, and simulated surface-to-air missiles were beginning to track her approach. She dove toward the deck, using terrain features to mask her approach while Goose called out timing information and threat warnings. The final attack run required precision flying at extremely low altitude, threading between hills and valleys, while maintaining enough speed to escape after weapons release. The simulated bomb release was perfect, with Sarah's aircraft delivering ordnance on target within the required parameters. But the mission wasn't over yet. She still had to escape the target area and return to base without being shot down by remaining defensive fighters. Sarah climbed back to altitude and turned for home, her fuel supplies running low but her confidence soaring. The debriefing that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during her time at Top Gun. The instructors praised her tactical decision-making and praised her ability to multitask under extreme pressure. Commander Mitchell, known for his sparing use of compliments, told the assembled pilots that Sarah's performance represented the kind of thinking and flying that saved lives in real combat situations. But perhaps more importantly, Sarah noticed a change in how her fellow pilots regarded her. The whispers and doubts had been replaced by genuine respect and acceptance. Torres himself approached her after the debriefing and offered his hand. "That was some flying up there, Ghost," he said with a grudging smile. "I'll remember not to underestimate you again." As Sarah walked back to her quarters that evening, she reflected on how much had changed since those first nervous days at Miramar. She had proven to herself and everyone else that she belonged among the elite of naval aviation. But she also understood that this was just the beginning. The real test would come with the final exercises and evaluations that would determine who would graduate at the top of the class. The Top Gun trophy was within reach, but Sarah knew that her toughest challenges still lay ahead. The final 2 weeks of Top Gun training arrived like a storm front moving across the California desert. Sarah could feel the tension in every briefing room, every hangar, and every pilot's ready room. The remaining pilots had been whittled down to the cream of the crop, and each one was fighting not just for graduation, but for the ultimate prize that would define their entire naval career. The competition had become so intense that friendships were strained, and every flight felt like a gladiatorial contest. Sarah's consistent performance had placed her in contention for the top spot, but she knew that one mistake could end her dreams. The instructors had made it clear that the final ranking would be based on a combination of factors: flying ability, tactical knowledge, leadership potential, and performance under pressure. Every exercise, every simulation, and every briefing was being evaluated and scored by the staff. The week began with night flying exercises, something that separated truly exceptional pilots from merely good ones. Flying an F-14 Tomcat in complete darkness while engaging multiple targets required a level of skill and confidence that few pilots ever achieved. Sarah had always excelled in night operations, but the pressure of the final evaluation added new layers of complexity to every maneuver. Strapping into her aircraft at 11 p.m., Sarah felt the familiar weight of her flight gear and the comforting presence of Goose in the back seat. The night air was crisp and clear, with unlimited visibility and calm winds, perfect conditions for the complex exercise ahead. Their mission involved intercepting multiple high-speed targets while coordinating with other flights, all without the visual references that made daytime flying seem easy. As Ghost Flight launched into the darkness, Sarah marveled at how natural night flying had become for her. The instrument panel glowed softly in the cockpit, providing all the information she needed to navigate three-dimensionally through the black void. Her radar painted a picture of the airspace around her aircraft, showing friendly and hostile contacts as they maneuvered for position in the invisible aerial chess match. The first intercept came quickly, with two simulated enemy fighters approaching from the west at high speed and low altitude. Sarah coordinated with her wingman to set up a classic pincer movement, using altitude and timing to gain tactical advantage. The engagement required split-second decision-making in complete darkness, with only radio calls and radar information to guide her attacks. "Ghost, you're cleared to engage Bandit 2, called the airborne controller, his voice calm and professional despite the complexity of the exercise. Sarah acknowledged and immediately maneuvered her F-14 into position, using vertical maneuvers to gain the altitude advantage. The simulated enemy pilot was skilled and aggressive, forcing Sarah to use every technique she had learned during months of training. The kill came after a prolonged engagement that showcased Sarah's ability to think 3 moves ahead. She had anticipated her opponent's defensive reaction and positioned herself perfectly for the final attack. "Fox 1, Bandit 2 is down," she called over the radio, indicating a successful beyond visual range missile shot. The satisfaction of a perfect intercept was tempered by the knowledge that 2 more targets remained to be engaged. The second phase of the exercise tested Sarah's ability to multitask under pressure. While engaging the remaining targets, she had to coordinate with ground controllers, manage her aircraft's fuel consumption, and maintain situational awareness of all friendly forces in the area. The mental workload was enormous, but Sarah's training had prepared her for exactly this type of scenario. What set Sarah apart from her competitors was her ability to remain calm and analytical, even when the situation became chaotic. While other pilots sometimes became fixated on individual targets or lost track of the bigger tactical picture, Sarah maintained a comprehensive understanding of the entire battle space. This skill had been developed through countless hours of study and simulation, but it was tested for real during these final exercises. The night flying phase concluded with a formation landing that required precise coordination between multiple aircraft returning to base simultaneously. Sarah led a flight of 4 F-14s through the approach pattern, calling out heading and altitude changes while monitoring the position of each aircraft in her formation. The landing was flawless, a testament to her growing reputation as a natural leader among the pilot candidates. The following week brought the ultimate test, a free play exercise where the remaining pilots would engage in unrestricted air-to-air combat. No predetermined scenarios, no scripted outcomes, just pure pilot versus pilot in the unforgiving environment of simulated combat. The instructors would observe and evaluate, but the pilots would be free to use any tactics they deemed appropriate to achieve victory. Sarah found herself assigned as flight leader for a 4-ship formation, tasked with gaining air superiority over a designated area. Her wingmen were all exceptional pilots who had survived the rigorous selection process, but Sarah knew that leadership in combat required more than just flying skills. She would need to coordinate their efforts, make tactical decisions under pressure, and ensure that her flight achieved its objectives while minimizing losses. The pre-flight briefing was Sarah's opportunity to demonstrate her tactical knowledge and leadership abilities. She outlined a comprehensive plan that took into account the strengths and weaknesses of each pilot in her flight, the capabilities of their aircraft, and the expected tactics of the opposing force. Her briefing was clear, concise, and confident, the kind of presentation that inspired confidence in those who would follow her into combat. Taking off as flight leader, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility for 3 other pilots and their aircraft. The formation joined up smoothly and proceeded to the training area, where they would face an unknown number of adversaries in a contest that would test everything they had learned during their time at Top Gun. Sarah reviewed her tactical plan one final time, knowing that flexibility and adaptability would be just as important as the initial strategy. The opposing force materialized on radar as 8 contacts, approaching from multiple directions, twice the number Sarah had expected. The odds were daunting, but Sarah had learned that superior tactics and coordination could overcome numerical disadvantage. She quickly modified her plan, repositioning her flight to take advantage of altitude and sun angle while avoiding the classic mistake of allowing the enemy to divide her forces. The engagement that followed would become legendary among Top Gun instructors, studied and analyzed for years afterward as an example of tactical brilliance under pressure. Sarah's flight used a combination of beyond visual range attacks and close-in maneuvering to systematically eliminate the opposing force, while suffering only minimal losses. Her ability to coordinate 4 aircraft while personally engaging multiple targets demonstrated the kind of leadership potential that the Navy valued most highly. When the smoke cleared and all aircraft returned to base, Sarah's flight had achieved a decisive victory against overwhelming odds. The debriefing that followed was subdued, with even the instructors showing visible admiration for the tactical display they had witnessed. Commander Mitchell, never one to show emotion, simply nodded and made notes in his evaluation book. Sarah knew that this performance would be remembered long after she left Miramar. Graduation day at Top Gun arrived with the subtle tension that accompanies all life-changing moments. Sarah stood in her dress blue uniform outside the ceremony hall, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. For 12 weeks, she had pushed herself beyond every limit she thought existed, competing against some of the finest military pilots in the world. Now, in just a few hours, she would learn whether those efforts had been enough to achieve something that had never been done before. The ceremony hall filled with family members, fellow pilots and senior naval officers who had traveled from across the country to witness this graduation. Sarah scanned the audience and spotted her parents sitting in the 3rd row, her father's Navy dress uniform bearing the ribbons of his own distinguished career as a naval aviator. Their presence meant everything to her, though she had been careful not to reveal how well she was performing during their brief phone conversations. Throughout the program, Commander Mitchell took the podium with his characteristic blend of authority and gravitas. His opening remarks focused on the exceptional nature of this particular class, noting that the pilots graduating today represented the finest tactical aviators the Navy had produced in recent years. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as he began to discuss the individual achievements and standout performances that had defined the past 3 months of training. The graduation format followed tradition, with awards presented in ascending order of importance. Sarah watched as her classmates received recognition for various achievements: best academic performance, most improved pilot, outstanding leadership. Each award brought the ceremony closer to the moment she had been dreaming about since that first day at Miramar, when she had declared her intention to prove herself among the elite. Lieutenant Commander Torres received the award for outstanding air-to-air combat performance, a recognition that surprised no one given his exceptional skills and competitive nature. Sarah applauded genuinely, having developed a grudging respect for the pilot who had pushed her to excel through constant competition. Their rivalry had made both of them better aviators, though she suspected Torres would never fully admit that being beaten by her had motivated his own improvement. The tension in the room increased noticeably as Commander Mitchell prepared to announce the winner of the most prestigious award in naval aviation training. The Top Gun trophy had been awarded annually since 1969 to the pilot who demonstrated the highest level of overall performance during the rigorous 12-week program. Winners of this award often went on to command fighter squadrons and achieve flag rank, making it one of the most career-defining honors in military aviation. This year's competition for the Top Gun trophy was exceptionally close, Commander Mitchell began, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Several pilots demonstrated the kind of tactical brilliance and flying skills that represent the very best of naval aviation. However, One pilot consistently exceeded expectations and established new standards for excellence in every phase of training. Sarah felt time slow down as the commander continued his remarks. She had imagined this moment countless times during sleepless nights at Miramar. But the reality was more intense than anything she had anticipated. Her parents leaned forward in their seats, sensing that something significant was about to happen, though they had no idea what their daughter had accomplished during her time at the elite school. Diso, winner of this year's Top Gun trophy, demonstrated not only exceptional flying skills but also the kind of tactical leadership that wins wars and saves lives. This pilot's performance during the final evaluation was particularly noteworthy, showcasing an ability to think strategically while executing flawlessly under pressure. The pause that followed seemed to last forever, though it was probably only a few seconds. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, call sign Ghost. The words hit Sarah like a physical force even though she had hoped to hear them. She was the first woman to win the Top Gun trophy in the program's 26-year history. The auditorium erupted in applause as Sarah walked to the podium, her legs somehow carrying her forward despite feeling disconnected from her body. She shook Commander Mitchell's hand and accepted the trophy, its weight both substantial and symbolic of everything she had achieved. Standing behind the podium with the trophy in her hands, Sarah looked out at the audience and saw a mixture of pride, surprise, and genuine respect on the faces looking back at her. Her fellow pilots were applauding enthusiastically, including Torres, who was smiling and nodding his approval. The moment represented validation of every sacrifice she had made and every doubt she had overcome during her journey to this point. The reception following the ceremony was a blur of congratulations and conversations about future assignments. Senior officers who had never spoken to Sarah before suddenly wanted to discuss her career plans and offer advice about her next steps in naval aviation. The trophy had instantly elevated her status within the tight-knit community of Navy pilots, opening doors that might have remained closed for years. Her parents approached with expressions of amazement and pride that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "Sweetheart, we knew you were an exceptional pilot. But this," her father said, gesturing toward the trophy, "this is beyond anything we imagined." Her mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "Your grandmother would have been so proud. She always said you were destined for something special." Commander Mitchell pulled Sarah aside during the reception to discuss her future assignment options. Winning the Top Gun trophy meant that she could essentially write her own ticket within naval aviation, choosing from the most desirable squadron assignments and career paths available. The conversation focused on her preferences for geographic location and aircraft type, though Mitchell made it clear that exceptional opportunities would be available regardless of her choices. "Chen, you've accomplished something remarkable here," Mitchell said, his tone more personal than she had ever heard from him. "Winning this trophy isn't just about being the best pilot in your class. It's about demonstrating the kind of leadership and tactical thinking that changes how we fight wars. The Navy has big plans for you, and I expect we'll be seeing your name on squadron command lists within the next few years." As the reception wound down and pilots began saying their goodbyes, Sarah reflected on how profoundly the past 12 weeks had changed her life. She had arrived at Miramar as a promising young pilot seeking to prove herself. She was leaving as the top graduate of the most prestigious training program in military aviation, with a trophy that would follow her throughout her career and define how others viewed her capabilities. The drive away from Miramar felt surreal, with the Top Gun trophy secured in the passenger seat of her car. Sarah had achieved something that would have seemed impossible just a few months earlier, but she also understood that this was really just the beginning. The trophy came with expectations and responsibilities that would shape every assignment and every decision for the rest of her naval career. Looking in her rear view mirror at the Miramar gate receding in the distance, Sarah smiled at the thought of what lay ahead. She had proven that gender was irrelevant when it came to tactical excellence and leadership in the cockpit. Now she would have the opportunity to demonstrate those same qualities in operational squadrons, where the training scenarios would be replaced by real missions with actual consequences. The girl from California had become Ghost, and Ghost had just made history. The years following Sarah's Top Gun victory unfolded like a carefully orchestrated military campaign, each assignment building upon the last to create a career trajectory that few naval aviators ever achieve. Her first operational squadron assignment was to F-14 Top Hatters, one of the Navy's most storied fighter units with a combat lineage dating back to World War II. Reporting to the squadron commanding officer with her Top Gun trophy credentials, Sarah found herself immediately placed in positions of increasing responsibility and trust. Flying operational missions from aircraft carriers was a completely different world from the controlled environment of Top Gun training. The challenges were more complex, the stakes higher, and the margin for error virtually non-existent. Sarah thrived in this environment, quickly establishing herself as one of the squadron's most reliable and skilled pilots. Her callsign Ghost took on new meaning as she developed a reputation for appearing exactly where she was needed during complex tactical situations. Within 2 years of joining the Top Hatters, Sarah was selected as a division leader, responsible for coordinating the activities of 4 aircraft and their crews during combat missions. This promotion was unusual for such a young pilot, but her Top Gun performance had marked her as someone with exceptional potential for leadership roles. The position required not just flying skills but also the ability to make tactical decisions under pressure while ensuring the safety and effectiveness of her entire division. The defining moment of Sarah's operational career came during a deployment to the Persian Gulf in 1998. Tensions in the region had escalated to the point where military action seemed inevitable, and her carrier battle group was positioned to provide tactical air support if diplomatic efforts failed. Sarah's division was assigned to fly combat air patrol missions, maintaining air superiority over critical shipping lanes while remaining ready to respond to any hostile actions. On a humid morning in August, Sarah's 4-ship division launched from the carrier deck to begin what seemed like a routine patrol mission. Intelligence reports suggested normal activity in the area, with no immediate threats anticipated. However, military situations can change rapidly, and what began as a standard mission would soon test every skill Sarah had developed throughout her career as a naval aviator. 2 hours into the patrol, Sarah's radar operator detected multiple unidentified aircraft approaching their area of responsibility at high speed and low altitude. The contacts appeared to be military fighters, though their nationality and intentions remained unknown. Sarah immediately alerted the carrier air traffic controllers and began maneuvering her division to intercept the unidentified aircraft while maintaining a defensive posture. The radio crackled with urgent communications as the situation developed rapidly. Ghost Flight, this is carrier control. You are cleared to investigate and identify the unknown aircraft. Weapons tight unless fired upon or cleared by higher authority. Sarah acknowledged the transmission and began coordinating her division's approach to the potential threat, knowing that the next few minutes could determine whether the situation escalated into actual combat. As her division closed on the unidentified aircraft, Sarah could see that they were indeed military fighters. Though she couldn't immediately determine their nationality or configuration, the unknown pilots were flying in a tight formation at extremely low altitude, apparently trying to avoid detection by radar systems. Their flight path would take them directly through the shipping lanes that Sarah's division was assigned to protect. Ghost Lead, this is Ghost 2, called her wingman over the radio. I count 4 aircraft, possibly MiG-29s. No external markings visible. Sarah processed this information while maintaining her intercept course, knowing that positive identification was crucial before any tactical decisions could be made. The rules of engagement were clear. She could not take hostile action unless fired upon first or specifically cleared by higher authority. The interception took place at an altitude of 500 feet above the Persian Gulf, with Sarah's F-14 Tomcat approaching the unknown aircraft from above and behind. As she closed to visual range, Sarah could see that the aircraft were indeed MiG-29 fighters, advanced Russian-built aircraft that suggested this was not a routine training flight. The lack of national markings made the situation even more tense, as it suggested possible involvement by non-state actors or covert military operations. Unknown aircraft. This is United States Navy fighter aircraft on your 6 o'clock. You are approaching restricted airspace. Alter course to heading 270 immediately. Sarah transmitted the warning on international emergency frequencies, hoping to resolve the situation without escalation. The response was immediate and unexpected. The lead MiG suddenly accelerated and began climbing aggressively, apparently trying to escape the area before positive identification could be made. What followed was a high-speed chase that showcased every skill Sarah had learned at Top Gun and refined through years of operational experience. The MiG-29 was a capable aircraft with excellent acceleration and climb performance, But Sarah's F-14 had advantages in radar capability and missile range. More importantly, Sarah had the tactical training to anticipate her opponent's moves and position her aircraft for maximum effectiveness. The chase lasted 12 minutes and covered over 50 miles of open ocean. Sarah maintained contact with the fleeing aircraft while coordinating with her wingmen to establish a containment pattern that would prevent escape while avoiding international incident. Her radio calls to the carrier kept higher. Command informed of the situation while requesting clarification of rules of engagement and permission to take more aggressive action if necessary. The situation was resolved when additional Navy aircraft arrived on scene, effectively surrounding the unidentified fighters and forcing them to land at a neutral airfield for questioning. Sarah's professional handling of a potentially explosive situation earned commendations from the battle group commander and reinforced her reputation as a pilot who could be trusted with the most sensitive and dangerous missions. The classified nature of this incident meant that Sarah could never discuss the details publicly, even with her family. It was the first of several similar situations throughout her operational career, each one requiring the kind of tactical judgment and flying skills that had made her the Top Gun champion. These experiences shaped Sarah's understanding of how military aviation really worked beyond the training environment, where political considerations and international law created complexities that no simulator could replicate. By 2001, Sarah had been promoted to lieutenant commander and was being considered for squadron command positions that would have made her one of the youngest female squadron commanders in Navy history. Her personnel file was filled with outstanding fitness reports and recommendations from senior officers who recognized her exceptional potential for leadership roles. The trajectory seemed clear: squadron command followed by staff positions and eventually flag rank. But then everything changed. The September 11th attacks transformed American military priorities overnight, shifting focus from traditional naval operations to counterterrorism and ground support missions that didn't require the kind of specialized fighter pilot skills that Sarah had spent years developing. The Navy began reducing its fighter squadrons and redirecting resources toward missions that seemed more relevant to the new security environment. The phone call that would change Sarah's life forever came on a Tuesday morning in 2003, just as she was reviewing flight schedules for her squadron's upcoming deployment. The voice on the other end belonged to Captain Williams, a Pentagon staff officer she had never met, but whose name carried significant weight in naval aviation circles. "Commander Chen, I have a proposition that I think will interest you. Can you be in Washington by Thursday for a classified briefing?" Sarah's curiosity was immediately piqued. Special assignments from Pentagon staff officers usually meant one of two things: either career advancement opportunities that came with significant responsibility, or classified projects that could make or break a military career, depending on their success or failure. Given her track record and reputation within the fighter pilot community, Sarah suspected it was probably the former, though she had learned to expect the unexpected in military service. The briefing took place in a windowless conference room deep within the Pentagon's maze-like interior. Sarah arrived wearing her dress blue uniform and carrying the security clearances necessary for whatever classified information was about to be revealed. The briefing officer was a civilian contractor whose credentials suggested involvement in some of the military's most sensitive aerospace projects, including experimental aircraft development and advanced weapon systems. "Commander Chen, what I'm about to show you falls under the highest levels of classification," the briefer began, activating a projection system that filled the room's main wall with technical drawings and specifications. "The Air Force is developing a new fighter aircraft that represents a quantum leap in combat capability. The F-22 Raptor incorporates stealth technology, supercruise capability, and avionics systems that will revolutionize air-to-air combat." Sarah studied the technical specifications with growing amazement. The F-22 was unlike anything she had seen during her years flying F-14 Tomcats and F/A-18 Hornets. The aircraft's radar cross-section was virtually undetectable. Its engines could sustain supersonic flight without afterburners, and its integrated avionics suite provided situational awareness capabilities that seemed almost science fiction. This was clearly the future of air superiority. "The Air Force has requested that the Navy provide our most experienced and skilled fighter pilots to participate in the F-22 test program," the briefer continued. Your name was specifically mentioned by multiple senior officers as someone who possesses the tactical knowledge and flying skills necessary to evaluate this aircraft's capabilities against current and projected threats. The assignment offer was both thrilling and terrifying. Joining the F-22 test program would mean leaving naval aviation temporarily to work with Air Force test pilots and civilian contractors at Edwards Air Force Base. The work would be classified at the highest levels and would require Sarah to sign agreements that would prevent her from discussing her activities with anyone, including her family, for potentially decades after the program ended. More significantly, accepting the assignment would mean putting her naval career on hold at a critical juncture. Sarah was being considered for squadron command positions that represented the next logical step toward eventual flag rank. Taking a 3-year detachment to work on an Air Force program could derail those opportunities permanently, as the Navy tended to promote officers who remained within traditional career paths. "Commander, I need to be completely honest with you about the implications of this assignment," Captain Williams explained during their private conversation following the briefing. "This is a career-defining opportunity that could establish you as one of the military's foremost experts in next-generation fighter aircraft. However, it's also a significant risk that could take you away from traditional Navy career progression just when you're positioned for major advancement." Sarah requested 48 hours to consider the offer. Though she suspected she had already made her decision, the opportunity to fly and evaluate what might be the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built was irresistible to someone who had dedicated her entire adult life to the pursuit of excellence in tactical aviation. The F-22 represented everything she had trained for during her career, from Top Gun through operational deployments. Her decision to accept the assignment meant saying goodbye to naval aviation for an indefinite period. Sarah's squadron colleagues were surprised and somewhat disappointed by her choice, as they had expected her to compete for command positions that seemed well within her grasp. The commanding officer who had mentored Sarah throughout her career expressed concern about the long-term implications of leaving traditional Navy career paths for experimental programs. Reporting to Edwards, Air Force Base felt like entering a completely different world from the naval aviation environment Sarah had known throughout her career. The test pilot community operated according to different rules and priorities, focused on pushing aircraft and systems beyond their design limitations to understand their capabilities and weaknesses. The culture emphasized technical precision and analytical thinking over the tactical aggression that characterized operational squadrons. At Sarah's first flight in an F-22 Raptor was a revelation that exceeded even her highest expectations. The aircraft's power and performance characteristics were unlike anything she had experienced during 15 years of flying military fighters. The stealth capabilities allowed the F-22 to approach targets undetected, while the Super Cruise engines provided sustained supersonic performance that transformed basic tactical concepts about air-to-air combat. More importantly, the F-22's avionics systems provided situational awareness that made previous generation fighters seem primitive by comparison. Sarah could track multiple targets simultaneously while remaining invisible to enemy radar systems, creating tactical advantages that would revolutionize air superiority missions. Flying the F-22 was like stepping into the future of military aviation. The test program required Sarah to evaluate the F-22's performance against simulated threats representing current and projected enemy aircraft capabilities. These evaluations involved complex scenarios designed to stress test every aspect of the aircraft's performance, from basic flying qualities to integrated weapon systems effectiveness. Sarah's role was to provide the pilots perspective on how the F-22 would perform in realistic combat situations. Her Top Gun training and operational experience proved invaluable during these evaluations. Sarah could analyze the F-22's tactical capabilities from the perspective of someone who had faced real threats during operational deployments, providing insights that pure test pilots might miss. Her reports emphasized how the aircraft's advanced capabilities would change fundamental assumptions about air-to-air combat tactics and strategy. The classified nature of the F-22 program meant that Sarah couldn't discuss her work with anyone outside the project, including her family and former naval aviation colleagues. This isolation was one of the most difficult aspects of the assignment, as Sarah had always relied on relationships with fellow pilots to process and understand her experiences in military aviation. Working on classified projects meant carrying the weight of extraordinary experiences alone. After 18 months of intensive testing and evaluation, Sarah had established herself as one of the military's foremost experts on F-22 capabilities and employment tactics. Her technical reports and recommendations influenced decisions about aircraft procurement, pilot training requirements, and tactical doctrine that would shape American air power for decades. However, this expertise came at a personal cost that would only become apparent years later. The successful completion of her F-22 assignment should have been a career highlight that opened doors to the highest levels of military leadership. Instead, Sarah found herself facing a choice that would ultimately lead her away from military service entirely. The Navy offered her several attractive assignment options, including the squadron command positions she had been considered for before joining the F-22 program. But something fundamental had changed during her time at Edwards Air Force Base. The decision to leave military service came gradually, then all at once. Sarah had returned to naval aviation after completing her F-22 assignment, accepting command of VFA 103 Jolly Rogers, one of the Navy's premier strike fighter squadrons. It should have been the pinnacle of her career. Squadron command represented everything she had worked towards since graduating from the Naval Academy. Yet something fundamental had shifted during her years working on classified projects that couldn't be discussed or shared. The isolation of keeping secrets had taken an unexpected toll on Sarah's sense of connection to military service. Her Top Gun achievement, her operational successes, her groundbreaking work on next-generation fighter aircraft, all of it existed in compartmentalized worlds that couldn't be integrated into a coherent narrative about her career. She found herself living multiple professional identities that could never be reconciled or fully explained to anyone, including herself. Command of the Jolly Rogers brought new challenges that highlighted these internal conflicts. Sarah was responsible for training and leading younger pilots who saw her as a role model and mentor, yet she couldn't share the experiences that had most shaped her understanding of modern aerial warfare. The classified nature of her F-22 work meant that her most relevant insights about future combat capabilities had to remain unspoken. The squadron's deployment schedule added personal complications that made military service increasingly difficult to sustain. Sarah was now 38 years old and wanted to start a family before it became impossible. The demands of squadron command, combined with the Navy's unpredictable deployment cycles, made it extremely challenging to maintain the kind of stable relationship that could lead to marriage and children. Meeting David Martinez during a brief shore leave in San Diego changed everything. David was a civilian engineer working for an aerospace contractor, someone who understood the technical aspects of military aviation without being subject to the same career demands and security restrictions that governed Sarah's life. Their relationship developed quickly, built on mutual respect for each other's intelligence and professional achievements rather than the complicated dynamics that often characterized military relationships. When David proposed, after 8 months of long-distance courtship, Sarah faced a choice that crystallized all the doubts and conflicts she had been experiencing about military service. Accepting the proposal meant committing to a future that would require compromises from both partners. But staying in the Navy would almost certainly mean choosing career over family in ways that seemed increasingly unattractive. The final decision came after a particularly challenging squadron exercise that should have been professionally satisfying but instead felt hollow and disconnected from Sarah's sense of purpose. She had successfully led her pilots through complex tactical scenarios, demonstrating the kind of leadership and aviation skills that had defined her entire career. Yet the achievement felt empty, as if she were going through motions rather than pursuing something meaningful. Sarah's resignation letter was brief and professional, citing personal reasons for her decision to leave active duty after 16 years of naval service. Her commanding officers tried to dissuade her, pointing out that she was positioned for promotion to captain and eventual flag rank if she remained on the traditional career path. The Chief of Naval Operations himself called to express disappointment and ask her to reconsider. But Sarah's mind was made up. She had achieved everything she had ever dreamed of in military aviation, and more. The Top Gun trophy, operational success, command of an elite squadron, participation in classified programs that would shape the future of American air power. Her career had exceeded even her most ambitious expectations. Now she wanted something different, a normal life with the possibility of marriage, children, and civilian pursuits. The transition to civilian life was more difficult than Sarah had anticipated. After 16 years of military structure and purpose, the freedom and ambiguity of civilian employment felt disorienting. She eventually found work with a commercial airline, initially flying cargo routes and then transitioning to passenger service as opportunities became available. The work paid well and offered the schedule flexibility she wanted, but it felt anticlimactic after years of flying high-performance fighters. Marriage to David in 2006 marked the beginning of a new chapter that Sarah approached. With the same determination she had once applied to military aviation, they settled in Denver, where David's engineering work was based and where Sarah could build seniority with a major airline while maintaining the anonymity she increasingly valued. The birth of their daughter Emma 2 years later completed the family life that Sarah had sacrificed military advancement to achieve. Emma grew up knowing that her mother was a commercial airline pilot, a career that seemed impressive enough without requiring detailed explanations about military service or classified achievements. Sarah told carefully edited stories about learning to fly and traveling to interesting places, but the Top Gun trophy remained hidden in a closet, wrapped in tissue paper like a family heirloom too precious or painful to display. The years passed quickly, filled with the normal rhythms of suburban family life. Sarah attended parent-teacher conferences, coached Emma's soccer team, and flew commercial routes that took her away from home for manageable periods, but never involved the kind of high-stakes missions that had once defined her professional identity. It was a good life, though sometimes she wondered if it was the right life for someone with her capabilities and achievements. Emma's graduation from college in 2024 marked another transition point for Sarah, who was now 51 and contemplating early retirement from commercial aviation. The airline industry had changed dramatically during her 18-year civilian career, with increased automation and decreased pilot autonomy making the work less engaging than it had been initially. Sarah found herself increasingly nostalgic for the challenges and excitement of her military years. The phone call that brought everything full circle came on a Wednesday afternoon in October 2024, just as Sarah was preparing to submit her retirement paperwork to Delta Airlines. The caller identified himself as Colonel Peterson from Air Force Personnel Command, and his first words immediately captured Sarah's attention. "Commander Chen, we have a situation that requires someone with your unique qualifications and security clearances." The situation Peterson described was both familiar and unprecedented. The Air Force was expanding its F-22 program to include additional test scenarios that required pilots with specific combinations of experience. Top Gun graduates with operational fighter experience and previous F-22 evaluation work. Sarah's name had appeared on a very short list of people who met all these criteria, and her previous work had been so highly regarded that senior officials were willing to make extraordinary arrangements to secure her participation. "Ma'am, I know you've been out of military service for nearly 20 years, but your expertise is exactly what this program needs. We're prepared to offer a civilian contractor position that would allow you to work part-time while maintaining your current civilian commitments." Peterson's offer was simultaneously flattering and terrifying, representing an opportunity to return to the world she had left behind. Sarah asked for time to consider the proposal, though she knew that David and Emma would support whatever decision she made. Her family had never fully understood why she had left military service at the peak of her career, but they recognized that civilian aviation had never provided the same sense of purpose and fulfillment that characterized her stories about naval aviation. The decision to accept the contractor position meant finally revealing to Emma the truth about her mother's military career. Sarah retrieved the Top Gun trophy from its hiding place and explained what it represented, describing her achievements in terms that Emma could understand and appreciate. Her daughter's reaction, pride, amazement, and slight bewilderment about why such accomplishments had been kept secret, helped Sarah understand that hiding her past had been unnecessary. Returning to classified aircraft testing after 2 decades felt like coming home to a world Sarah had thought she had left forever. The work was challenging and meaningful in ways that commercial aviation had never been, reconnecting her with the sense of purpose that had driven her throughout her military career. More importantly, It allowed her to finally integrate all aspects of her professional identity, instead of compartmentalizing them into separate, unconnected narratives. Flying advanced aircraft again reminded Sarah of why she had fallen in love with aviation in the first place. The combination of technical precision, tactical thinking, and split-second decision-making that defined military flying had been missing from her civilian career. Returning to this environment, even as a contractor, felt like recovering a part of herself that had been dormant for 20 years.